Bole Baba Ki Jai. Now we'll proceed with chanting after the 6th day of Navratri fire ceremony. Now we'll do some chanting and we'll begin with Jai Ganesha, appropriately to remove any obstacles. Jai Ganesh Vineshwari ki jai, Bole Baba ki jai. So this is Guru Day. Thursday. So let's sing number 27, Omkara Guruji. Keep the words simple. Guruji Bhagwan ki jai, Bole Baba ki jai. We'll finish one with one to the Divine Mother. And we'll do number 11, O Mata. And to the left are the translations, but simply means O Mother, and our mother's name is Haidakhandi, because she's the consort of Haidakhandi, the one from Haidakhandi, who is Babaji. As far as we know, she hasn't appeared in physical form, but somebody had a dream and described her to an artist, and there she is. And then a beautiful marble mortier statue was made for us here at the ashram. And most of the ashrams around the world have both Babaji and Haidakhandi as beautiful mortis, which is a statue filled with the life of that being. So it's an elaborate thing. So, O Mata. Vishveshwari Mata ki jai. Vishveshwari Mata ki jai. Shri Mani Raj Maharaj ki jai. Shri Sasaji Maharaj ki jai. Bole Baba ki jai. So now we're going to do a discourse for those that would like to listen to a beautiful story from the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam, which is one of the Puranas about the Divine Mother, written by Veda Vyasa, who's told this story and taught the story to Sutta, as well as his son Sukadeva. And now Sutta is telling it to more munis, and then we're spreading it to the munis here in Presto. This is a very beautiful story. It's one of my favorites. It's fine. You can move in closer.
I can hear.
Need to hear better. I'll speak as loud as I can. So this is a beautiful story about a king and his ardent devotion to the Divine Mother. So I love it. We'll probably only get halfway through the story. So Jen, you might have to come again tomorrow. Who knows? You get the other half. Because they're usually cliffhangers, aren't they? Okay. So, Suttas asked, Immaculate Vedavyasa, tell me more of the Blessed Divine Mother, and read more of this Devi Purana. I feel wondrous peace steal over my spirit as I listen to you. Vedavyasa said, once in Kosala, in the city of Ayodhya, there ruled the noble king, Dhruvasandi, who was a king of great Dharma, and Kosala flourished during his reign. The king had two beautiful young wives, Manorama and Lilavati, who were the delight of his day and night. In due course, they both became pregnant. Manorama gave birth first to a fine prince, and he was named Sudarshana. A month later, Lilavati delivered a radiant child, and they called him Shatrujita. Here's somebody's phone. As the two children grew, it turned out that Satyajita was by far the more handsome of the two, and he was the one with the more gifted tongue. Soon there was no doubt which of them was the favorite of the people, the ministers, and even the king himself. They all openly preferred Satyajita to his less charismatic older brother. The king was a keen hunter, and one day he went into the jungle with his party and wounded a lion with his arrows. And he pursued him, which is a very dangerous thing. And in the end, the lion tore out the king's throat as the king killed the lion, and they both lay dead, their bodies fallen across each other. Word flew back to the palace in Ayodhya, and the city was plunged in mourning. Vasista, who was the guru of the kingdom, arrived in the kingdom and performed the last rites for the dead Dhruvasandi. His body was cremated in the jungle heart, as though on a field of war where he had fought his final battle. And though Satyajita was a great favorite with the people and even with the king's ministers, there was no question that the older prince, the quieter Sudarshana, would now be king. Being just 5 years old, the princes were not yet of age, but the kingdom must have a sovereign, at least in name. Vashishta said the coronation should not be delayed because the people were anxious for their future. But now there arrived in the kingdom the king Udajita, who is Lilavata's father and the grandfather of Satyajita. And he argued that Satyajita was only 1 month younger than the introverted Sudarshana and was far better suited by both gifts and temperament to be the king. Of course, Manorama's father, Visarina, king of Kalinga, arrived in Ayodhya as well, and he, of course, was adamant that Sudarshana should be made king. An acrimonious debate ensued in the royal sabha of the city. Both Uttajita and Virasena had brought their armies with them, and they were camped outside the city gates in case the dispute had to be settled by force. Well, indeed it did. And so they went to war. And it was not pretty. And the dust of that battle rose in clouds and covered the sun's face so that night seemed to have set in betweens, or a blood-red twilight where the dust cloud reflected the lake of the gore below. The battle lasted until Uttajita, this is the younger grandson's grandfather, cut off the head of Virasena in a scarlet fountain. The legions of Virasena fled screaming. Manorama, the queen with the oldest grandson, heard the news and was terrified. She was certain that Uttajita would kill her and her son Sudarshana as well. Desperately, she called her husband's loyal minister Vidala, who was the most intelligent man in the kingdom. The queen said, "My husband is dead. Uttajita has killed my father. My son is still a child, and I have no one to turn to. When Uttajita rides into Ayodhya again, both my son and I will be at his mercy. His daughter Lilavata has always been envious of me anyways. Tell me, what should I do, Vidala, and quickly?" It seemed like the minister, Vidala, had already thought of everything. He didn't hesitate a moment before he said, "You must not stay here, and neither must I. We must flee before Uttajita returns. I have an uncle, Sabahu, who lives in the forest around Varanasi. He has an army and will protect us." On the pretext of seeing Uttajita outside the city gates, Manorama came out of Ayodhya in a chariot with Sudarshana, a maid, and Vidala. Uttajita allowed her to perform the last rites for her father, and then at twilight, she said she would return to Ayodhya. In fact, she slipped away and rode hard for 2 nights and days and reached the banks of the Ganges. But it seemed that her time of misfortune was upon her. Manorama, her Saki, Vidala, and young Sudarshana were waylaid by some bandits who took all the jewels and gold they had and even their chariot and horses. Her whole world destroyed in a few days, the queen crossed the Ganga by raft at night. Vidala feared for her life if they remained on that side of the river. After another day's hard journey, they arrived ragged at Bharadvaja's ashram in Chitrakoot. Little Sudarshana, grave and clinging to his mother's hand. The Muni saw the beautiful young queen and said to her in some amazement, "Devi, why are you here in this jungle and your young son with you?" Now all her grief burst from her. She began to sob uncontrollably and could not answer the august Muni. The Muni turned to Vidala, the minister, who said quietly, "My lord, this is Manorama, who is the king Durasandis of Kosala's first queen." Vidali told the Rishi all that had transpired in Ayodhya after the king's death. Because the man spoke the truth, the Muni said, "Stay with us in our ashram. You have nothing to fear here, and I promise you that one day Sudarshana shall be king of Ayodhya." And so the Muni gave Manorama and Sudarshana a little hut to live in, and they remained there in peace with the queen's Saki. Vidala, who stayed on in the ashram also, for he could not go back to Ayodhya. So Uttajita went back to Ayodhya in triumph, and he asked for Manorama and Sudarshana, and he found out that they had indeed deceived them and left. But the queen and her son had fled. Kosala must have a king, so on an auspicious day, Uttajita had his grandson, Satyajita, crowned in Ayodhya. Vasistha was the chief priest, and all the Munis and ministers chanted the Vedas, and all were very happy. Yet There were those in Iota who were not carried away by the festivities. Such quiet men remembered Manorama and Sudarshana and agonized about where they were. When Udajit had made certain that the throne of Iota was secure with his grandson, he went home to his kingdom. But it wasn't long before Udajita heard that Manorama and her son were in an ashram of a munis in Chitrakoot. He gathered his army and set out to cross the Ganga and that mountain beyond on Chitrakuta. Manorama heard that Udajita was coming, and she went in tears to the munis, saying, "Muni, what shall I do? Udajita means to come here and kill my child, so his grandson is secure on the throne of Iota. Save me, Holy One, my life and my sons are in your hands." When Udajita arrived in that ashram, the Muni met him and said, "Manorama and her son are in my care. You cannot see them." Udajita replied, "I will not leave without taking them with me. You are a man of peace, Muni. Give them to me peacefully, or I will take them by force." The Muni's eyes glittered. He said in a soft voice, "You know what happened to Kusiki when he tried to take Vasista's cow from the Rishi's ashram with force. I beg you, leave us before I grow angry." The king called his ministers aside and said, "I mustn't leave Manorama and Sudarshana alive. Even the weakest enemies can grow strong in time and become a threat. I have killed Virasena. If I spare Manorama and her son, one day they will surely come for my head and my Satrajitas. I must take these two from here and kill them. There is no soldiers to this old hermit's ashram to prevent me." But the minister said to him in alarm, "My lord, never be so rash. The Muni needs no soldiers to fight us. He can reduce our army to ashes with a look from his eyes. If the Muni protects Manorama and her son, we can do them no harm. Moreover, my lord, Manorama has no wealth of any kind. Her son can never be a threat to us. All this world spins round on the wheel of fate. Be merciful today and ask for the Muni's blessings, and let us leave here in peace." Udajita struggled a moment with his Kshatriya kingly nature, then fell at the feet of the Muni and asked him pardon and blessings, which that kindly Rishi gave. The king went back to his kingdom. Manorama wept in relief, and she prostrated before the Muni in gratitude. Sudarshana grew in the sanctuary like a moon waxing. His inseparable companions were the Rishi's sons, and it was a joy to see those children at play together. One day the Muni's son saw Vidala in the ashram while they were at a game with Sudarshana, and called out playfully to him, "Cleave, cleave." Sudarshana, who was a little far away, repeated that mantra, but leaving out the last consonant. "Cleave, cleave," he called in his lisping voice, and felt the most delicious stirring in his body. Again and again the child repeated that syllable, never knowing it was the Mula mantra of Kamadeva, who is the god of love. Each time he felt a soft ecstasy within his body. So without being initiated by any guru other than destiny, the little prince Sudarshana acquired a mystic mantra. He would repeat it in his mind whenever he was alone and just before he fell asleep, and that mantra transformed his very nature. Day by day he grew more and more brilliant. When Sudarshana was 11, the rishis began to teach him the Vedas. They were astonished at how quickly he mastered the Dharma Sastras. No one knew about the secret power he had gained from repeating Kamadeva's Mula mantra. The once reticent prince became a magnificent archer and scholar. He knew all he needed to know about politics and the moral sciences. He brimmed with a quiet assurance. Then one day, while young Sudarshana sat chanting his mantra, the Divine Mother appeared before him in a vision. She was crimson-hued like a kipsuka flower. She wore scarlet raiments and great blood-red rubies. He saw her as the deity Lakshmi. The deity called Sudarshana softly to follow her through the forest to the banks of the Ganges. The prince went without an instant hesitation, and after he had bathed in the great river, the deity gave him a splendid bow, 2 magic quivers of arrows, and an unearthly coat of mail. Then she raised her hand over him in benediction and vanished. After this, Sudarshana became a fierce divine mother Bhakta and worshipped her, the goddess, whenever he could, often wandering down alone on the banks of the Ganges where she had once called him. Now it happened that the king of Kasi had a lovely daughter called Shashikala. One day the princess was with her Saki under a flowering tree in the garden when she saw a Brahmin hurrying along into her father's palace. Shashikali stopped the man for fun and cried, "Whither from in such a haste you come, Muni?" "Why, from the Muni Bharadvaja's ashram, princess," replied the cheerful mendicant. Playfully, Shashikali said, "Tell me of an exceptional thing in that ashram, Muni, the most beautiful thing of all." Without hesitation, the Muni said, "Why, the Prince Sudarshana, princess. Ah, he is handsome past describing. The son of the king of Ayodhya. I would even say, that Brahman went on breathlessly, that if you haven't seen our prince, your eyes have been given to you in vain. And besides, he is a great archer and a deep scholar too. Well, let me put it thus, lovely Shashikala. Our Sudarshana is fit to be your husband." And smiling broadly, the Muni breezed away on his errand, leaving Shashikali flushed, a little short breath, her heart beating faster than ever before in her life. The Rishi's description captured the prince's imagination, and she fell in love with Sudarshana without ever having seen him. One night, perhaps a month after she first heard of the prince in the jungle, Shashikali dreamt of the Divine Mother. The goddess appeared brilliantly in her dream and said, "Child, the prince in the forest is my bhakta. Ask me for a boon, and he shall be yours." Shashikali felt she was drowning in a sea of rapture. The next morning, she was so radiant that her mother, the queen, began to press her to divulge the cause of her joy. But Shashikala was bashful and would say nothing, only to her Saki, her servant, the one who had been with her when she first heard of Sudarsana, did she confess the truth, giggling and blushing wildly all the while. Then suddenly the princess had tears in her eyes as she whispered, "Oh, Saki, what shall I do now? I have never seen this prince, yet I am in love with him. I see him in my dreams, sweet Saki, and he is as handsome as Kamadeva. I have no peace anywhere, doing any of the old things that used to give me such simple joy. I can never be happy until I have made Sudarshana my husband." The Saki laughed throatily. "Such wild dreams you must be having, princess." Shashikali blushed, and she said, Why couldn't I have fallen in love with any of the princes or kings my father knows? How easy everything would be then. What is gained easily is seldom worthwhile and hardly lasts a brief season," said her Saki, who appeared to know about these things. So Prince Sudarshana, who had lost his kingdom when he was barely 5 years old, who had grown up on wild fruits and berries in a rishi's ashram in the heart of the forest, with no wealth or army, no power, found a kingdom to rule over which he never dreamt of. Never knowing it, he became the king of a beautiful princess's heart. Shashikali had learned the Saraswati mantra when she was just a child, and now she began to chant it every day and to pray to the deity to make Sudarshana prince of her dreams, the lord of her life. One day when he was meditating on the Kama mantra, Sudarshana had another vision of the deity. The next morning it happened that the hunter king in the nearby village brought a gift for Sudarshana, he arrived in the forest with a splendid chariot with 4 white horses. The hermits of the ashram said to Sudarshana, "The deity has blessed you. All the omens cry out that you will soon be king of the world." Sudarshana redoubled his worship, and anywhere he rode in the chariot, it would seem that an army rode with him of countless foot soldiers, horses, and chariots and elephants. It was the magic of the Mula mantra. That prince felt as if he was already monarch of the great kingdom, for the wind whispered that he was. The birds called his Rajan, and the animals of the forest honored him. He worshipped the deity at every moment, and was perhaps happier than any king with a real kingdom. But Sashikali pined for him, the lover she had never set her eyes on. The princess was pale and never was even leaving her room, and her father, Sabahu of Kashi, decided that the only husband would help her daughter's ailment. And Sabahu had an opulent pavilion made and called for her daughter's Swayambara. And that's where all the princes and kings come, and she chooses who she wants to marry. But even while the construction was underway, his child said stubbornly to her servant, "Sudarshana and I shan't marry. Sudarshana is my husband. I shan't marry any other prince." The Saki went to the queen and told her, and she told the king, who started laughing and said, "Sudarshana is a pauper hiding in a rishi's ashram. He has no kingdom, no wealth, no army, no power. What kind of prince is he? Tell Sashikali to remove that foolishness from her head. She will see 100 fine princes at the Swanbar. She can choose any one of them." The queen called her lovely daughter and sat her in her lap like she used to do when she was a child, and kissed her and said, "My child, you must forget this fantasy you have woven about Sudarshana. It is time to begin your real life. Your father has heard what you have been saying and has made him very anxious. Do you know that Sudarshana is the most unfortunate prince in all India? How can you even think of marrying him? He has no kingdom, no friends except the hermits in the forest, no wealth or power. He lives on roots and fruits. And you, my precious child, there is no princess in all the world as beautiful, as accomplished, and as fortunate as you are. Forget this childish fancy, Shashikali. You will see 100 magnificent princes for you to choose from. Why, Sudarshana himself has a brilliant brother, Satrajita, who is king of Kosala. You could have him if you want." The queen lowered her voice then, and her eyes filled with warning. She said, "Satrajita's grandfather, Udajita, is determined to kill Sudarshana at the first chance he gets, so his grandson's throne is secure. The prince has escaped his life so far only because of the Muni's protection and saying that he was just a child and should not be harmed. But the prince is a young man now, and how long would the Rishi save him from Uttajita? Uttajita has already killed Virasena, Sudarshana's grandfather." But her daughter replied, "The deity herself appeared to me in my dreams and told me that Sudarshana is destined to be my husband. How can I marry any other man?" So the day before the Swayambara, Sashikali was feverishly anxious. She sent a message to the Muni's ashram. The message the man bore for Prince Sudarshana was, "The deity Bhagavati, the Divine Mother, has ordained that you and I must be married. Tomorrow is my Swayambara. O Prince, make sure you are in my father's city tomorrow, or I will kill myself before I become any other man's wife." When Sudarshana heard the message, he prepared to set out at once, for an irresistible sense of destiny stirred in him. The Muni, Bharadvaja, gave him his blessings. But when his mother, Manorama, heard that he meant to do, she wailed, "You mustn't go, Uttajita. You mustn't go. Uttajita will kill you if he sees you there. My son, you are all I have, the support of my old age. Don't abandon me. But her son said serenely, Mother, what is written must come to pass, and not you nor I can prevent it. But it is the Divine Mother, the Devi Bhagavati, who commands me to attend the Swayambara, and I must go. Seeing how determined he was, his mother began to shower blessings on him. Ah, my son, let Ambika protect you. Then she cried, I will go with you, my child. You cannot go alone into danger. Brahma, who was once a queen, climbed into her son's chariot, and they set up for Kashi. In that city, its king, Sabahu, received him with honor. When he saw how splendid was the prince who had grown in the forest, he housed Sudarsana and his mother in a large mansion and had his own servants wait on them. Meanwhile, kings and princes from all over Bharatvarsha had gathered in Varanasi for Sashikali's Swayambara. For the word of her beauty had traveled everywhere. All the princes and kings had come. Yudhishthira had come to Kashi as well, bringing his grandson Satyajita, who was king in Kosala. When Yudhishthira heard that Sudarsana had arrived in a chariot and the princes preferred the prince who had nothing, the king roared, I will kill that upstart. Shashikala will be married to my grandson, Satyajita. But the kings of Kerala, who was famed for his knowledge of Dharma, said, this is an Icha Swayambara. The prince's choice shall be binding. There is no place here for arms or show of strength. Why are you so anxious when Satyajita is such a brilliant prince? Moreover, he is king in Ayodhya. Why should Shashikali choose him, or indeed any of the other Ksatras here? Calm yourself, Yudhishthira. Your hands are already tainted with Virasina's blood. So, tomorrow, we'll hear some very, very beautiful stories about what went on, and both Shashikali's and Sudarsana's beautiful faith that they have in the Divine Mother. It's definitely one of my very favorite stories. So, very strong. Any questions?
You read that beautifully. Thank you.
The strength of our beautiful mother and praying to her even when things look very, very, very difficult. And here we have our Devi altar. We do the puja every morning, and Hanuman on the right and Bhaira Baba on the left. And inside here is our beautiful Divine Mother, Haidakhandi, and Babaji and Lord Shiva. I'll focus here a moment as we gather together with our love and our prayers, sending them throughout the whole cosmos and throughout our whole being, that we bring peace and happiness, compassion, patience, and trust to the whole world. Bole Baba Ki Jai. We'll see you tomorrow at 11 for the fire ceremony.